Your transformation begins the moment you decide that the voices around you are no longer louder than the voice within you. When you stop letting opinions, judgments, and expectations shape the way you see yourself, something shifts on the inside. You begin to realize that most of the noise you've been reacting to was never meant for you in the first place. It was a distraction designed to keep you from hearing your true calling, the one that whispers instead of shouts. And when you choose silence over noise, clarity over chaos, inner truth over outer pressure, you open the door to a different version of yourself. One that is stronger, more grounded, and finally in control. Silencing external noise is not about shutting people out, but about reclaiming your mental and emotional space. It's about recognizing how much power you've given away by letting the world tell you who you should be and what you should want. When you choose silence, you choose awareness. You start to notice how much of your life has been spent reacting instead of creating. You see how much energy you've wasted trying to meet standards that never matched your purpose. In silence, you begin to understand your own patterns, your own values, your own vision for your future. When the noise fades, your intuition becomes clearer. The voice inside you that has been drowned out by fear, comparison, and doubt finally begins to speak again. It reminds you of your capabilities. It reminds you of your potential. It reminds you of the dreams you buried because you were too busy trying to fit into a world that wanted you to shrink. In silence, that inner guidance becomes your compass, leading you back to the path that was always meant for you. Transformation does not happen in the spotlight. It happens in the quiet moments when no one is watching and no one is applauding. It happens when you sit with your thoughts long enough to understand what needs to be healed, what needs to be released, and what needs to be rebuilt. It happens when you stop allowing noise to dictate your pace and instead move with intention, discipline, and faith in the process. When you silence external noise, you free yourself from comparison. You stop measuring your progress against someone else's timeline. You stop feeling behind just because someone else appears ahead. You realize that your journey is not a race but a personal evolution, and every step you take, no matter how small, is progress. Silence reminds you that growth has its own rhythm, and yours does not need to match anyone else's. In that quiet space, you also become more aware of what truly drains you. You begin to see which conversations, environments, and relationships pull you away from your purpose. You notice how much heaviness you've been carrying simply because you were too distracted to put it down. Silence gives you the courage to let go of what no longer serves your growth, allowing you to move lighter, freer, and more aligned with your future. Silence also teaches you to listen to yourself, to your emotions, to the subtle signals your life has been giving you. You start to hear the truth behind your excuses. You start to feel the difference between fear and intuition. You start to recognize when you are acting out of pressure instead of purpose. This awareness becomes the foundation of your transformation because you can only change what you are willing to see. As the noise fades and your inner world becomes clearer, your confidence begins to rebuild from the inside out. You no longer need external approval because you know who you are becoming. You no longer chase validation because you finally validate yourself. You no longer seek direction from others because you trust your own path. This internal certainty becomes the fuel for your growth, allowing you to move forward with strength that doesn't depend on anyone else. Over time, silence transforms from something uncomfortable into something empowering. It becomes your sanctuary, the place you return to whenever you need clarity, direction, or renewal. It becomes the space where you remind yourself of your progress, your purpose, and your potential. You start to protect it because it protects you in return. And as your inner world becomes grounded and steady, your outer world begins to shift as well. You make decisions from a place of confidence instead of confusion. You pursue goals with intention instead of desperation. You build habits from discipline instead of pressure. Each step becomes more aligned, each action more purposeful, and each moment a reflection of your inner evolution. Focusing on yourself is the foundation of personal power because it redirects your energy back to the one thing you can fully control: your own thoughts, habits, decisions, and growth. When you stop scattering your attention across people's opinions, expectations, and evaluations of your life, you regain authority over your direction. You stop living reactively and begin living intentionally. This shift is the birthplace of strength, clarity, and the kind of confidence that cannot be shaken by outside noise. When you make yourself the priority, you begin to understand your needs on a deeper level. You recognize what supports your growth and what hinders it. You see where your time is wasted, where your energy is drained, and where your focus is misplaced. This kind of self-awareness becomes a powerful tool because it allows you to redesign your life around what truly matters rather than what others want from you. It is not selfishness, it is alignment. Focusing on yourself also helps you build emotional independence. You stop relying on others to motivate you, encourage you, or validate your worth. Instead, you learn to generate your own momentum. You learn to trust your own voice. You learn to create stability from within rather than searching for it externally. This internal stability becomes a source of unshakable power because no one can take from you what you have built within yourself. The more you focus on your inner world, the clearer your outer world becomes. You make better decisions because they come from a grounded place. You set boundaries because you finally understand your value. You choose your relationships wisely because you are no longer willing to settle for anything that undermines your growth. You begin to build a life that reflects your potential rather than your fears. When you focus on yourself, you start to notice the patterns you've been repeating, patterns that held you back, limited your progress, or kept you stuck in cycles you didn't recognize. Once you see them, you can break them. Self-focus reveals the truth behind your actions, your habits, and your emotional responses. It gives you the power to transform them instead of being controlled by them. This focus also fuels discipline. When your attention is no longer scattered across unnecessary distractions, you have the mental space to commit to your goals. You begin to show up consistently, even on the days you don't feel like it. You push through resistance because your purpose has become clearer. With each disciplined action, you build a stronger identity, one rooted in commitment, not convenience. Focusing on yourself teaches you the value of solitude. You learn to enjoy your own company and use quiet time to recharge, reflect, and plan. Solitude becomes a place where you reconnect with your purpose, sharpen your vision, and strengthen your mindset. It becomes a sanctuary where you prepare for the next level of your journey without interference or distraction. As you pour into yourself, you also begin to recognize your potential in ways you never did before. You see possibilities instead of limitations. You notice strengths you overlooked. You uncover gifts you didn't realize you had. This newfound awareness becomes a source of empowerment because you finally understand how much you are capable of when your energy is focused inward and not scattered outward. Focusing on yourself also shifts the way you handle challenges. Instead of seeing obstacles as threats, you start viewing them as opportunities to grow. You become more resilient because you've built an inner foundation strong enough to handle pressure. You stop falling apart in moments of difficulty and instead rise with intention and clarity. Eventually, focusing on yourself becomes more than a practice. It becomes a lifestyle. You move through life with a sense of purpose, confidence, and direction. You stop apologizing for prioritizing your growth. You stop feeling guilty for protecting your peace. And you begin to understand that personal power is not something you search for outside of yourself. It is something you cultivate from within through focus, discipline, and unwavering commitment to your own evolution. Silence is a strategy, not a weakness, because it allows you to operate from a place of intention rather than reaction. When you choose silence, you are choosing to think before you speak, observe before you move, and understand before you respond. It gives you the space to gather clarity, conserve energy, and make decisions that align with your long-term purpose rather than your temporary emotions. Silence becomes a shield that protects your focus and a tool that sharpens your awareness. Silence gives you the advantage of observation. When you're not rushing to speak or prove yourself, you are free to watch how people behave, what they reveal, and where their intentions lie. You begin to see patterns in conversations, patterns in behavior, and patterns in opportunities. While others are loud and distracted, you are quietly collecting information that will help you move smarter and stronger. Observation becomes your superpower because it allows you to understand the world while the world knows little about your next move. Choosing silence also keeps you from wasting your energy on pointless conflicts. Not every comment deserves a response, and not every challenge deserves your involvement. By staying silent, you avoid unnecessary battles that drain you emotionally and mentally. Silence protects your peace by removing you from moments that would have pulled you into negativity. It becomes a form of discipline, teaching you when to engage and when to walk away without explaining a thing. Silence is a strategy because it keeps you unpredictable. When people don't know what you're thinking, planning, or building, they can't interfere with it. They can't discourage it, criticize it, or sabotage it. They're left guessing while you're quietly moving forward. This unpredictability becomes a powerful advantage because you are shaping your own path without outside influence. Your progress becomes harder to block because no one knows where you're headed until you arrive. In silence, your creativity sharpens. When the world isn't drowning out your thoughts, you make room for inspiration, insight, and new ideas. You begin to see solutions you overlooked. You find answers within yourself instead of searching for them in others. Silence becomes the space where your mind expands, your imagination activates, and your purpose becomes clearer. It's in those quiet moments that breakthroughs occur and new visions are born. Silence trains your emotional control. When you don't respond impulsively, you're able to process your feelings with maturity and strength. Instead of reacting out of anger, fear, or frustration, you give yourself time to understand what triggered you and why. This emotional intelligence becomes a weapon in your growth. You rise above situations that once pulled you down, and you gain mastery over your inner world in ways loudness could never offer. Silence also helps you build credibility. When you speak less but act more, people begin to take your words seriously. Your actions become your language. Your results become your explanations. Silence turns your achievements into your voice because you're no longer trying to convince anyone of your potential. You're proving it. Over time, your silence becomes more powerful than any argument you could ever make. Through silence, you learn patience. You begin to understand that timing is everything, and that rushing often leads to mistakes. Silence allows you to wait for the right moment, the right opportunity, the right alignment. It teaches you that not everything needs immediate action, and not every situation requires your involvement. Patience becomes part of your strategy, helping you move with precision instead of panic. Silence also gives you space to heal. When you step back from the noise, you create room to address what hurts, what lingers, and what needs to be released. Healing requires stillness. Growth requires reflection. Transformation requires solitude. Silence gives you the safety to confront your inner wounds and the strength to rebuild yourself from the inside out. Over time, silence becomes a form of empowerment. You begin to value it not as an absence of words, but as a presence of strength. You use silence to protect your vision, build your character, and elevate your mindset. You move with a calmness that others can't disrupt and a confidence that doesn't need to be announced. Silence becomes your strategy for rising higher, growing stronger, and becoming unstoppable. Your self-talk shapes your identity because every word you speak to yourself becomes a seed planted in your subconscious mind. The thoughts you repeat begin to form beliefs, and those beliefs eventually guide your actions. When you tell yourself you're capable, you behave like someone capable. When you tell yourself you're unworthy, you shrink into the shadows of that expectation. Your inner dialogue becomes the architect of your identity, influencing how you see yourself and how you show up in the world. The voice you listen to the most becomes the voice you become. Your self-talk determines the limits or freedoms you experience mentally. If your inner language is filled with doubt, fear, and negative assumptions, your identity shapes itself around limitations. You begin to think you can't, so you don't. You begin to believe you're not enough, so you act like less. But when your self-talk is empowering, encouraging, and intentional, your identity expands. You start stepping into possibilities you once avoided. You move with a confidence rooted in the thoughts you consistently feed your mind. Your self-talk also influences the standards you set for yourself. When you speak to yourself with respect, you naturally demand more from your life. You stop tolerating half-hearted effort, toxic environments, and relationships that don't honor your value. You rise to meet the level of the language you use internally. The higher your internal standard, the stronger your identity becomes. You begin to act like someone who deserves more because you finally speak to yourself like someone who does. The identity you build through self-talk becomes the filter through which you interpret your experiences. When your inner voice is strong, setbacks become lessons instead of failures. Challenges become opportunities for growth rather than reasons to quit. You start to see yourself as someone who is capable of navigating life with purpose and resilience. Your perspective shifts because your identity has shifted, and it all begins with the words you repeat to yourself daily. Self-talk creates your emotional baseline. When your inner dialogue is harsh and critical, you live in a state of emotional tension. You constantly feel inadequate or uncertain. But when your self-talk is compassionate, supportive, and grounded, you develop emotional stability. You learn to comfort yourself during hard moments and motivate yourself during moments of doubt. This emotional foundation strengthens your identity, allowing you to move through life with clarity instead of confusion. The stories you tell yourself become the stories you live out. If you keep telling yourself you're not ready, your actions will reflect hesitation. If you keep telling yourself you're destined for more, your actions will reflect ambition. The subconscious mind does not argue with your thoughts. It accepts them as truth and works to make them real. Your identity becomes the result of the narrative you choose to repeat. You hold the power to rewrite that narrative at any moment. The way you talk to yourself shapes your level of discipline and consistency. When your inner voice encourages responsibility, accountability, and long-term thinking, you create habits that reinforce growth. You start to follow through because your self-talk aligns with your identity as someone who finishes what they start. Discipline becomes easier when your identity matches your goals, and your identity strengthens when your self-talk supports your discipline. Self-talk influences your confidence more than any external compliment ever could. Confidence built from within lasts longer because it comes from a place of truth rather than approval. When you consistently affirm your strengths, acknowledge your progress, and speak belief into your future, you build a confidence that no setback can destroy. You begin to trust your ability to overcome challenges because your internal language reinforces your resilience. Your self-talk also affects how you carry yourself in relationships and social situations. When your inner dialogue is rooted in worthiness, you no longer approach connections from insecurity or fear. You communicate with clarity, set boundaries without guilt, and surround yourself with people who reflect the value you believe you have. The identity shaped by empowering self-talk attracts healthier environments because you become aligned with your own worth. Over time, the words you speak to yourself create the framework of the person you become. Your habits, decisions, reactions, and ambitions all stem from the identity shaped by your internal dialogue. When you change the way you talk to yourself, you change the way you see yourself. And when you change the way you see yourself, you change everything you are capable of becoming. Growth does not require an audience because the most powerful transformations happen in the unseen hours, far away from applause, recognition, or validation. When you are truly committed to evolving, you stop performing for others and start showing up for yourself. You embrace the quiet moments where no one is watching, no one is cheering, and no one is measuring your progress. These silent seasons become the birthplace of strength, discipline, and the kind of self-trust that can only be built in private. When you grow without an audience, you free yourself from the pressure to impress. You learn to move with authenticity instead of performing for approval. You stop chasing attention and start chasing alignment. Your actions become rooted in purpose rather than perception. Growth becomes real when it's no longer driven by who might be watching, but by who you are becoming. In that solitude, you develop a deeper understanding of your own values and motivations. Private growth protects you from premature judgment. When people don't see what you're working on, they can't limit it, question it, or speak fear into it. You are able to make mistakes, learn lessons, and pivot directions without carrying the weight of other people's opinions. This freedom allows you to take risks that contribute to your evolution. You grow at your own pace, on your own terms, without the noise of comparison steering you off course. When you stop depending on an audience, you begin to appreciate the process itself. You learn to celebrate quiet victories that no one else knows about. You value discipline over recognition and progress over praise. You start to realize that the reward is not in the applause, but in the transformation happening within you. This mindset shift strengthens your character in ways external approval never could. Growth in silence also toughens your resilience. When you keep going despite the lack of attention, you prove to yourself that your commitment is real. You show yourself that your goals matter deeply, even when the world isn't paying attention. This kind of resilience prepares you for bigger stages later because you've built the habit of consistency without needing applause to fuel you. You become disciplined because it's who you are, not because someone is watching. In the quiet seasons, you become more self-aware. You notice your patterns, your strengths, your weaknesses, and the areas where you need to shift. Without external voices clouding your perspective, you can confront your truth honestly. This kind of introspection becomes a powerful catalyst for growth because you can only change what you are willing to acknowledge. Solitude gives you the clarity to see yourself clearly and the courage to evolve. Private growth also builds humility. When your progress isn't broadcast, you learn to value the work more than the spotlight. You realize that greatness is constructed in layers, developed through patience, effort, and inner discipline. Humility keeps you grounded, reminding you that real growth is about becoming, not performing. It helps you stay focused on the journey rather than the need for recognition. When you grow without an audience, you begin to understand the importance of protecting your energy. Not everyone deserves access to your development. Not everyone is qualified to speak into your journey. By keeping your growth private, you limit the influence of negativity, doubt, and jealousy. You create a safe internal environment for your evolution to flourish without interference. In solitude, you learn to generate your own motivation. You no longer rely on others to push you, hype you up, or validate your progress. You learn to inspire yourself, challenge yourself, and hold yourself accountable. This internal motivation is far more powerful than external encouragement because it is sustainable. It keeps you moving even on the days when no one is there to notice your efforts. As you continue to grow without an audience, you create a foundation so strong that when the results finally become visible, they speak for themselves. You don't need to explain your progress or justify your success because the work you did in private becomes undeniable. Growth built in silence becomes power displayed in confidence, and the transformation that happens quietly becomes the kind of change that others notice without you ever having to say a word. Life changes when belief, discipline, and focus align because these three elements form the foundation of lasting transformation. Belief gives you the vision, discipline gives you the structure, and focus gives you direction. When all three work together, you move from wishing to becoming. You shift from hoping for change to creating it. You stop living by chance and begin living by intention. This alignment creates a level of momentum that ordinary effort cannot produce. Belief is the starting point because without it, nothing else has power. When you believe in your ability to grow, your mind begins to open to new possibilities. You stop seeing obstacles as dead ends and start seeing them as stepping stones. Belief becomes the internal fire that keeps you moving even when circumstances challenge you. It shapes your identity, strengthens your mindset, and gives you permission to reach for more than what you've known. Discipline takes that belief and turns it into consistent action. It is the bridge between desire and achievement. Discipline keeps you moving forward on days when motivation is missing. It pushes you to do what needs to be done, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. When discipline is aligned with belief, your effort becomes purposeful. You stop relying on emotion and start relying on commitment. And that commitment builds the habits that define your future. Focus ties everything together by directing your energy toward what truly matters. Without focus, your belief is scattered and your discipline is misapplied. Focus filters distractions, eliminates unnecessary noise, and keeps your attention on the path ahead. When you decide what deserves your energy and what doesn't, your progress accelerates. You begin to move with clarity instead of confusion and with precision instead of hesitation. When belief, discipline, and focus align, you develop a deep sense of inner strength. You no longer need outside approval because you trust your path. You no longer question your potential because you see evidence in your actions. You begin to build a self-image rooted in progress, consistency, and determination. This inner strength becomes the anchor that keeps you steady through challenges and setbacks. Aligned belief, discipline, and focus create momentum that compounds over time. Small steps become major breakthroughs. Tiny efforts accumulate into powerful changes. You begin to experience growth that feels natural instead of forced. Each day becomes an opportunity to build on the one before, and you start to realize that transformation is not a single event, but a continuous expansion of who you are becoming. This alignment also sharpens your decision-making. You stop saying yes to everything and start saying yes only to what aligns with your purpose. You no longer waste energy on distractions, drama, or detours that pull you away from your goals. Every decision becomes intentional. Every choice becomes meaningful. Your life starts to reflect the clarity within you, and your results begin to mirror your priorities. As these three elements work together, you begin to elevate your standards. You expect more from yourself because you know what you're capable of. You pursue goals with conviction because you trust your direction. You hold yourself accountable because your identity has shifted to match the person you're becoming. Your growth becomes non-negotiable, and the way you show up changes permanently. Aligned belief, discipline, and focus also influence the people and environments you attract. You naturally gravitate toward relationships, opportunities, and experiences that match your new mindset. You distance yourself from anything that disrupts your progress or lowers your energy. Your alignment becomes a filter that protects your growth and guides your evolution. Over time, this alignment transforms your daily life, your long-term vision, and the way you see yourself. You begin to operate from purpose instead of pressure, from clarity instead of confusion, and from strength instead of fear. Life responds differently to a person who is aligned internally. Doors begin to open, opportunities appear, and progress becomes steady because your belief fuels you, your discipline sustains you, and your focus guides you.